The Gulfstream G650 jet, adorned with the presidential seal of the Republic of Zambesi, sliced through the twilight sky, descending toward Mobu International Airport. Inside, President Gabriel Nyambe sat alone in the opulent cabin, staring out at the glittering city lights of his capital below. It was his city, his country, yet it felt distant, as if it belonged to someone else. The Davos trip had unfolded precisely as orchestrated. His speech at the World Economic Forum had earned standing ovations from Western business tycoons and politicians. Zambesi, Africa's new investment frontier, the presentation had proclaimed, words he hadn't written, outlining policies he hadn't chosen, promising prosperity he didn't fully believe in. 20 minutes to landing, Mr. President, his chief of staff, Thomas, announced, stepping into the cabin with a tablet. I've prepared a summary of the commitments made at the forum. Nyambe nodded, skimming the document. New mining concessions for European corporations, privatization of the national water utility, tax breaks for foreign investors, cuts to public spending, all framed as gateways to wealth, yet each subtly funneling Zambesi's riches outward. The French foreign minister was particularly pleased with your presentation, Thomas continued. He mentioned President Macron wants to schedule a state visit to discuss expanding their military presence in the northern provinces. More troops on our soil, Nyambe said softly, almost to himself. To protect us from threats they identify. Thomas hesitated, then nodded. Sir, nothing's finalized. Thank you for the report. As the jet touched down, Nyambe braced for the familiar ritual of his return, the honor guard, the press statements, the carefully curated image of a strong, independent African leader. But in his 6 years as president, he couldn't recall a single major decision made without Western approval. The motorcade glided through Mobu's wide, colonial-era avenues, past gleaming corporate towers juxtaposed with sprawling slums where most Zambesians lived in poverty, despite the nation's vast diamond wealth. The contrast had once gnawed at him, but he'd been trained to focus on the metrics his economic advisors championed: GDP growth, foreign investment, international credit ratings. At the presidential palace, Henri Dovoy, his French security advisor, awaited with the evening briefing. Welcome back, Mr. President, Dovoy said with polished deference. A few matters require your attention. First, the IMF delegation has submitted their quarterly review with recommended policy adjustments. They're requesting your signature by tomorrow. Nyambe accepted the thick document without opening it. He knew its contents: more austerity, more concessions to foreign interests, more erosion of Zambesi's sovereignty in exchange for financial lifelines. Also, Dovoy continued, there's been increased activity from opposition groups in the eastern provinces. Nothing serious, but we recommend postponing your planned visit to the region. These are my citizens, Henri. I should hear their concerns. Dovoy's smile was tight, his eyes cold. Of course, Mr. President. However, our intelligence suggests foreign agitators may be involved. The French counterterrorism unit can handle the investigation. Foreign agitators, Nyambe repeated, the phrase a familiar catch-all for dismissing legitimate grievances: protests over pollution from foreign-owned mines, anger at water privatization, demands for fairer revenue sharing from Zambesi's resources. There's one more thing, Dovoy added, his tone shifting. Our monitoring systems detected unusual diplomatic activity between Burkina Faso and Mali this morning. Nothing concrete, but given Traoré's recent resource nationalism, we should remain vigilant. Ibrahim Traoré. The name alone unsettled Western advisors. The young Burkinabe leader had become a thorn in European and American sides, nationalizing gold mines, expelling foreign military bases, and forging resource-sharing agreements with other African nations. Keep me informed, Nyambe said, his voice neutral. That night, alone in his private quarters, Nyambe poured a glass of scotch, a brand favored by the British colonial administrators who once ruled Zambesi. The irony wasn't lost on him. His phone buzzed with a notification from an unknown number. Mr. President, a diplomatic representative from Burkina Faso requests a confidential audience tomorrow. This matter concerns both our nation's sovereignty. For security reasons, this request is delivered outside official channels. Nyambe stared at the message. Any contact with Traoré's government was flagged by his Western advisors, meetings were discouraged, cooperation minimal. Burkina Faso's model of African independence threatened the interests that propped up Nyambe's presidency. Before he could respond, another message arrived from the same number: the representative will arrive at your private residence at 9 a.m., disguised as maintenance personnel. Your staff has been informed of scheduled repairs. Accept or reject with a single word. His finger hovered over the keyboard. Every instinct screamed to reject the meeting, to report it to Dovoy. Yet something deeper, the fading echo of the idealist he'd once been, who dreamed of serving his people, compelled him to type a single word: accept. Sleep evaded him that night. He lay awake, contrasting Zambesi and Burkina Faso. Both nations shared colonial scars and abundant resources, yet their paths diverged starkly. Zambesi remained tethered to Western influence, its diamond wealth failing to lift its people from poverty. Burkina Faso, under Traoré, was carving an independent course, forcing Western powers to scramble for control in the region. At precisely 9 a.m., a maintenance worker was escorted to Nyambe's private residence. Once alone, the man removed his cap, revealing himself as Ousmane Sankara, Burkina Faso's deputy foreign minister. "Thank you for receiving me, President Nyambe," Sankara said. "President Traoré sends his highest regards." "This meeting is irregular, Minister Sankara," Nyambe replied cautiously. "Our countries maintain official diplomatic channels. Channels monitored by your French advisors," Sankara noted. "President Traoré believes what he has to propose requires absolute confidentiality." "And what is he proposing?" "A private meeting, just the two presidents, no advisors, no security, no diplomatic entourage, at the hunting lodge on our shared border, 3 days from now." Nyambe's surprise was evident. "We understand this is unusual," Sankara continued, "but President Traoré believes the future of African sovereignty depends on leaders speaking freely, without Western oversight." "What would be the agenda?" "That's for the presidents to decide, but Traoré has information vital to Zambesi's security and your personal position." Before Nyambe could probe further, his secure phone rang, the line reserved for his closest staff. "Excuse me," he said, answering. "Mr. President," his secretary's voice was urgent, "Mr. Dovoy is on his way to your residence. He says it's a security matter requiring immediate attention." Nyambe glanced at Sankara, who had overheard and was already donning his disguise. "I'll leave through the garden," Sankara whispered. "President Traoré will be at the lodge at noon, 3 days from now. Your presence would be an honor, but he understands if circumstances prevent it." After Sankara's discreet exit, Nyambe barely composed himself before Dovoy arrived with 2 French intelligence officers. "Mr. President, we've detected unusual communications from the Burkinabe embassy," Dovoy said bluntly. "Our analysts believe they're attempting unauthorized contact with your government." The open admission of surveillance stunned Nyambe. They weren't even pretending to respect Zambesi's sovereignty. "Have they breached any diplomatic protocols?" he asked, keeping his tone even. "Not technically, but given Traoré's destabilizing influence, any communication should be monitored carefully." Dovoy studied Nyambe's face. "Has anyone from their embassy contacted you directly?" "No," Nyambe lied, surprised at his own ease. "But I'd expect to be informed of diplomatic communications without French intelligence vetting them first. This is still an independent nation, Henri." A flicker of surprise crossed Dovoy's face, perhaps at Nyambe's rare assertion of authority. "Of course, Mr. President. We're merely providing security support per our bilateral agreements." After Dovoy left, Nyambe sank into his chair, weighing the decision before him. Meeting Traoré could unravel his ties with the Western powers sustaining his government. Ignoring the meeting might mean missing critical information about threats to his position. His thoughts were interrupted by another message from the unknown number: "The West's most reliable African leader just had a secret meeting with Ibrahim Traoré." After the meeting, the world balance changed forever. Attached was a link to an encrypted file. Nyambe frowned. The message spoke of a meeting that hadn't yet happened, one he hadn't agreed to attend. That evening, in the secure privacy of his bathroom with the shower running to mask sound, Nyambe opened the file on his personal tablet. It contained 3 items: an audio recording, a document, and a video. The audio, dated 2 days earlier, captured a conversation between Dovoy and a man with a Parisian accent. "Nyambe has been our most reliable asset in the region," the stranger said. "The mining concessions alone have saved our corporations billions." "He's becoming restless," Dovoy replied. "Asking questions about mining revenues, the military base expansion. Then perhaps it's time to consider alternatives. General Mwamba has always been ambitious. The timing would be delicate. We need the new diamond concessions secured first. Can you maintain control until then?" "Of course. Nyambe trusts me completely. He doesn't make a move without our guidance." Nyambe's hands shook as he opened the document, a confidential agreement between the French government and multinational corporations, outlining strategies to control Zambesi's resources. His name appeared repeatedly, described as "our man in Mobu" and a "reliable facilitator." A section titled "Contingency Planning" detailed transitioning power if he became problematic. The video showed a meeting he wasn't meant to see, Western diplomats and corporate executives discussing how to manage him. A French official spoke, "Nyambe is useful for now, but we must be prepared if he develops nationalist tendencies like Traoré. The general understands our interests and would ensure continuity." The general, General Mwamba, his defense minister, appointed on French recommendation. For hours, Nyambe sat motionless, grappling with the reality of his role. He'd known he was propped up by Western powers, but he'd convinced himself it was a partnership for Zambesi's benefit. Now he saw himself as a caretaker, ensuring his nation's wealth flowed outward while poverty persisted. Worse, he was expendable, to be replaced if he stepped out of line. By dawn, he'd decided, he would meet Traoré. The Zambesi-Burkina Faso border cut through arid, sparsely populated land. A colonial-era hunting lodge stood as the only notable structure for miles. Reaching it undetected required careful planning. Nyambe announced a personal day at his country residence, a rare retreat his security team accepted. They remained at the perimeter while he slipped out through a service entrance, where a childhood friend waited with an unmarked vehicle. The 3-hour drive through remote terrain gave Nyambe time to reflect on his presidency, 6 years of compromises, reading other speeches, signing agreements that enriched foreign interests while his people languished. When had he lost his way? Perhaps it was gradual, seduced by power's comforts, convinced that Western cooperation was the only path. Perhaps it was fear, knowing the fate of African leaders who defied those powers, overthrown or assassinated. At the lodge, an unmarked vehicle was already parked. Ibrahim Traoré, younger than Nyambe expected, wore simple military fatigues, no insignia or red beret to mark him as the revolutionary defying the West. "President Nyambe," Traoré said, extending a hand. "Thank you for coming." "President Traoré," Nyambe replied, shaking it. "I believe you have some explaining to do." "The message, the files." Traoré's expression remained neutral. "Let's talk inside." The lodge was sparse, free of electronics or surveillance risks, just 2 men, theoretically equals, but worlds apart in governance. "I didn't send you any message or files," Traoré said once seated, "though I'm curious what they contained." Nyambe studied him for deception but found none. "Then who did?" "I have some ideas," Traoré replied, "but first, tell me why you came. You could have ignored my invitation. Your Western friends would have preferred that." Nyambe hesitated, then chose honesty. "The files showed me what I already suspected, that I'm not truly in control of my country. Decisions are made in Paris and Washington, not Mobu." Traoré nodded. "And how does that make you feel, President Nyambe?" The question struck deep. No one had asked about his feelings in years, certainly not his Western advisors, who handed him policies to enact without regard for his views. It makes me feel hollow, Nyambe admitted. Like I'm playing a role in someone else's story. I know that feeling, Traoré said quietly. Before I took power, I watched my predecessors follow the same script, open our resources to foreign exploitation, accept unfavorable loans, allow foreign military bases, all while our people stayed poor. But you changed the script. Yes, and they tried to kill me for it. 3 assassination attempts, 2 coup plots, economic sanctions, banking restrictions. Traoré leaned forward. Yet here we are, a year later. Our gold is ours, our decisions are ours, and despite Western predictions of collapse, our economy is growing. Nyambe felt admiration tinged with skepticism. Burkina Faso and Zambesi are different. What worked for you could be disastrous for us. Perhaps, Traoré conceded. But there's something universal about dignity, about sovereignty. Your country has Africa's largest diamond reserves, yet your people are among the poorest. Does that equation make sense to you? Before Nyambe could respond, Traoré placed a small device on the table. This is why I asked to meet you. It contains proof that your defense minister, General Mwamba, is planning a coup with French support. They've decided you're becoming too curious, too questioning. The operation is set for next week. The device projected holographic images, communications between Mwamba and French officials, bank transfers, operational plans. The coup was real, meticulously planned, and likely to succeed. Why share this with me? Nyambe asked. Our countries aren't allies. Because Africa doesn't need more foreign orchestrated coups, Traoré replied. Despite our differences, we're both Africans living with colonialism's lingering shadow, just in new forms. He paused. The West maintains control by keeping us divided, competing for their approval, their investments, their protection. But when African nations stand together, that control begins to crumble. If I move against Mwamba, Nyambe said, I'll face the full opposition of those who placed me in power. Yes, Traoré agreed. They'll cut economic ties, freeze assets, support opposition groups, maybe even attempt military intervention. How did you survive it? By understanding their power relies on isolation. They want African nations competing. But when we stand together, is that why you invited me here? To propose an alliance? I invited you because I see something in you, the same dissatisfaction I felt before acting, the same question keeping you awake. Am I serving my people or those who exploit them? Nyambe couldn't deny Traoré's insight. Those thoughts had haunted him for months. What exactly are you proposing? A new economic alliance, Burkina Faso, Zambesi, and any African nation willing to prioritize sovereignty over foreign approval. Joint resource development, shared technical expertise, mutual defense agreements. The West would never allow it, Nyambe said reflexively. Allow? Traoré repeated. That word reveals the problem. Why should independent nations need permission to cooperate? The question lingered, unanswered. I'm not asking for an immediate decision, Traoré continued. Deal with the coup threat first. But know this, when you choose to stand, you won't stand alone. As they parted, Nyambe asked, if you didn't send those files, who did? There are patriots everywhere, Traoré said cryptically, even in institutions loyal to foreign interests. The return journey gave Nyambe time to plan. By the time he reached the palace, he had a strategy, one requiring courage and precision. Over 3 days, he quietly contacted trusted military officers, sharing select evidence of the plot. He reached out to the national police chief, a professional unaligned with foreign powers. Most crucially, he confided in his wife, Amara, his sharpest political advisor, sidelined by Western voices. You've known all along, haven't you? He asked her. About how I've been used. I've watched you disappear, she said softly. The man I married, who wanted to build a Zambesi for its people, faded year by year. Why didn't you say anything? I did, Gabriel, for years. But you stopped listening. She took his hand. What changed? He told her everything, the meeting, the coup evidence, the years of manipulation. So what will you do now? What I should have done years ago. Led. On the fourth day, Nyambe acted. Loyal military units arrested General Mwamba and 6 conspirators. Back in the palace, Traoré stood on his balcony, watching the city lights. The weight of leadership remained heavy, but now it was tempered by a sense of possibility. The soil of Burkina Faso had spoken, and its people were ready to claim what was theirs. The path ahead would be fraught, foreign powers would not relinquish their influence easily, but for the first time, Burkina Faso held the power to chart its own destiny. And Ibrahim Traoré, guided by the legacy of Sankara and the wisdom of elders like Badiono, was determined to lead his nation toward true independence.